NYB Community, episode 226 of the Minding Your Business podcast, entrepreneurship, real estate, trending news. There's no business like minding your own. I'm your host, Champ Ron. Greetings, welcome, salutations to you. Subscribe to the podcast, 5 star, wherever you get your pods. That helps us continue to grow the NYB community. Hope that you're enjoying the beginnings of the holiday season. You're probably now pulling out your Christmas music if you haven't already been listening to it for like a month now. You're probably in the midst of that. So hope you're doing well and you're ready to engage with us again on another episode here at 226. We just keep moving these. I don't know what I'm gonna say when I get to like episode like 1,000. I'm gonna have to do like something like really huge for you guys once we get up there. But we'll keep moving along, and as long as I've got your support, we'll continue to move that train right down the tracks. Business has been going good. It's been a great real estate's been going good. I'm wearing out closing attorneys, so I'm looking forward to a nice a gift. If Santa doesn't catch COVID, he'll come by my house, and hopefully he wears a mask when he comes down the chimney and bring me something nice if I've been a good boy. But it's been a nice time with some of the real estate investing business that I've been doing, and hope that things are going well for you as well, even despite all the challenges and obstacles that we all face. Listen, right up the street from us, we've got our friend here, Jessica Katz, who's joining us on the podcast. We're excited to have her join. And when I say up the street, because you guys know I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. And so our guest Jessica is right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, which is bridesmaid central there for bridal parties and that sort of thing. And a lot of other great things that are going on there in Nashville. She's a coach and speaker with Liberated Elephant. And we're going to talk some today about organizational development, which is a really good subject that we've talked about on this podcast a few times. And we like to get different perspectives and angles because it impacts so much, whether you're an entrepreneur or business owner yourself or you work for an organization. That's so critical. And so Jessica being a trainer, a mentor, a coach, someone who's very well versed and understands, how to, engage leaders who drive organizational culture. And as we all know here in 2020, right, that organizational culture, whether it's the federal government, whether it's other governments or organizations and companies, we know that organizational development has been something on the forefront as we've seen the impact of the current environment. And so, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us here on the Minding Your Business podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here today.
Yep. Excellent. So let's jump right in. Before we get into some of the organizational stuff, let's learn a little bit more about you. Tell us about yourself, kind of your journey, Jessica, how you got to where you are today.
Sure thing. So my professional journey really starts with project management. I have a project management background, usually in the IT world, information technology world. But often those information technology organizations were inside other industries like healthcare or retail or manufacturing.
Sure.
And I was a project manager for a while. It's back there. I'm not going to admit how many years ago that was. And
it's been a while.
It's been a while. And I found that role to be really exhausting the way we used to do business.
Sure.
And it was a lot of running after people, chasing after them. Are you done yet? Why isn't this done yet? How come we're not done yet? There's a lot of those questions, which, it's a role that lends itself to a slightly more micromanagement. And it wasn't home for me. I ended up transitioning into some Agile roles, Agile software development, and that industry. I went into the role of a Scrum Master, and then from a Scrum Master into an Agile coach, and have since transitioned into my own business, Liberated Elephant, doing coaching from an Agile perspective or coaching from a professional development perspective.
Yeah, so. Excellent. Now, what is the Liberated Elephant? I when I hear that, I picture, obviously in my goofiness, I picture an elephant, right? well, in the literal sense. And I was like, the liberated elephant. Where'd that name come from?
Sure. So one of my superpowers is essentially to see the chinks in the armor, to see where a breakdown in communication is happening or where something isn't quite jiving,
Yeah.
And what I often refer to those as were the elephants in the rooms, right? There's somebody who's a little bit overbearing in a meeting. That would be an elephant in a room. There could be a policy that's written into the system, written into the organization that creates a behavior, but nobody's really talking about the root cause of that. That's an elephant in the room. And so what my business does is comes in, points at those things with you, and says, here's the elephants I see, and then works to liberate them. We're really going to try and get them out of the room. So we're either going to talk about them and make them work for you, or we're going to remove them altogether. So that's the idea behind liberating your elephants.
Yep, absolutely. And so, you mentioned kind of your superpower, being able to see chinks in the armor, so to speak, and see where there's breakdowns. Where did that come from? Is that something you had kind of coming up that you always noticed, or did you kind of develop that into your career?
Yeah, I mean, as a species, humans see patterns anyway, and we're driven to that anyway. My father is in business, and so some of it came from my dad. He was probably my first mentor, and and sort of just learning how to read the room and space in that way. The
Yeah.
rest of it, I'm very introspective, but I'm also really extrospective, and the combination of those two things made it possible for me to see when I was an elephant. And if you can see yourself in the elephants, then it's easier to see elephants in general.
Right.
So,
it takes an elephant to catch an elephant.
Yeah.
So as you develop your career, Jessica, tell me about those early parts in your career. Did you work kind of in the corporate realm before you started your business, or unpack that for us?
Sure. Yeah. I've worked in the corporate realm primarily. I've been in retail, manufacturing, healthcare. I train now in some government spaces, but I haven't worked directly in any government spaces. So I've been in technology. I've been in a large spread of industries, but project management really started for me it started first in healthcare, and then I ended up in an organization that was it's service-based, and then moved to an organization that was an insurance organization, and then moved to an organization that was healthcare again. I'm outside Nashville. Nashville is a pretty healthcare-oriented town, so
yes,
there's a bit of it's just like healthcare smattered all the way through the process. And thankfully, healthcare has all kinds of rules and regulations too. So there's some crossover with when I work with government agencies. So so it's a big, long spread, and and it's given me such a lovely perspective.
Okay.
We have a tendency, if we're in an industry, we have a tendency to only think through the lens of that industry. And because I've had so many industries in my history, it means I can bring other lenses to the table, and we can start talking about how it can be different.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what transition or what helped you transition to your own business? Was there any specific event? Was it just time? Did you just see an opportunity? What kind of, navigate us through that, your pathway? Because, here's the thing, Jessica, a lot of folks listening, that's kind of their desire, right? Is to, kind of create this lane pathway where they transition potentially either out of the workforce or reduce what they're doing in the workforce to expand, what they might do in their own business. So, talk to us, about that pathway.
Sure. So I'm going to first tell you what the catalyst was, and then I'm going to wrap it around. I'll give you the story around this catalyst. So the catalyst is that I got passed over for a promotion. That was the catalyst that made me say, okay, enough of this. It's time for my own business. Right. And we often have some sort of catalyst like that when we make these choices to really make a shift. Sometimes it's a shift to another company. Sometimes it's a shift to start our own, but there's something that catalyzes the reason why.
True.
I've been at that point, I had been on my journey towards coaching for some time. And my superpower isn't always seen as a positive inside organizations.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah. When I look at an organization and say your baby's ugly, here's where. It's
Right.
it's not pleasant for people to hear that kind of news. And,
Right.
and if you're inside the organization, the phrase that we use for that, for somebody that's inside the organization that sees the chinks in your armor and is there with you doing the work, they are considered, they're what's called an internal predator. So I'm looking for the holes in in our models, in our structure, in our processes and policies and communication, and trying to change them. I never said, hey, we have a chink in an armor and now you have to go solve the problem. I always said,
Right.
hey, we have a chink in the armor. How can I help us solve this problem? What can we do to change it? But I'm sort of a constant growth person, which can be exhausting. So for the average bear, it can be really exhausting. And at the time that organization was looking to promote someone, they had a tendency to promote people that looked and felt just like the leadership that already existed. And I create dissension, right? I create, conversation, controversy, reflection, change. That's what I bring. And so from inside the organization, it wasn't what they wanted in that role. And I went, well, the heck with you then. I'm out of here.
Wait a minute. So wait a minute, Jessica. To heck with you. Is that really what you said, Jessica?
It's certainly what I said at home.
Okay. I was going to say, I ventured to say you probably used a word a little stronger than heck.
I did at home.
Yep.
There was a lot of cussing and a bit of crying. I was really disappointed. Yeah. I really wanted that promotion because I wanted to make a difference. And it was so frustrating to watch them hire outside consultants who they would listen to and not listen to the expertise that was sitting inside their four walls. It was just really frustrating. And it wasn't the first time I'd seen that, right? In many other places, I've seen them promote people that looked and felt just like the leadership and didn't take into account the needs for the strategic changes they wanted to make. And so there was a lot of, crying and gnashing of teeth. And gnashing of teeth. And then I, came back to the office. I was there for a while. One of my peers got promoted into the position. She was now my boss. So there was a lot of emotional stuff to roil with in there. And as I was digging that apart, I was like, well, what I really want to do is to influence and help people get from where they are to where they want to be, whatever that journey is. And if I'm in the system, I'm too committed to the direction that takes. I'm too invested in deciding the direction.
Sure.
So if I'm outside the organization and I come in as a consultant, I get to hear, what's your journey? Where do you want to be? Now let's figure out how to get you there. And I don't have to live with the choices they make.
Yeah, very true.
Right.
Very true. In making those choices, right? When you go into an organization, what do you come with any kind of preconceived notion, Jessica, of what to expect, or do you try to come with kind of this open mind? If basically a company is calling you and say, help, we recognize that we have this issue and it's impeding something within their scope or mission, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's overarching or on a particular project. And so they're willing to hire you to pay you to help, kind of flush out that and then, help develop the culture to a more positive pathway. So, what's kind of your, give us an inside kind of behind the curtain sense of what your mindset is going into a particular opportunity with an organization.
Sure. So opportunities, when I go into an organization, there's been some conversation in advance. So there's been, somebody's called me and been, hey, I heard about you. This is what we're trying to do. I write a proposal, all that jazz happens on the front end, right? The process of writing that proposal, I'm uncovering what's the problem that made you call me. What's the thing you're trying to create? What's the pains that you're experiencing? What's the blockers that you're experiencing? What benefit do you think you'll get from bringing me into your organization? And I have to land those questions first before I can know if I'm the right person for what they're trying to achieve, and B, be able to come in with some sort of approach. Now,
Right.
there is sort of a general approach. I try and come in first, and I've heard from 1 or 2 people when I get through the proposal, they hire me, I come in. Now I have a whole organization to hear from. And
Okay.
I need to hear everybody's voice as much as I can. So there's an assessment period that happens,
Sure.
what is happening, a little bit of interviewing, a little bit of surveying, a little bit of observation, and then pulling that together into what do I think is real here. I'm going to make
Sure.
sense, and there's some sense making that happens. Now that I've investigated what I think is real here, here's what I think the next steps are. What steps do you
Yeah.
want to take? Right.
Exactly.
So that's, I generally, I don't sell the whole package at the beginning. I sell the assessment at the beginning.
Sure.
And then I write an assessment that says, you don't have to stay with me, but here's where I think your pains are.
Yeah.
All the whole process, I'm trying to work myself out of a job anyway. So, I want to teach people to fish more than I want to fish
Right.
for them. So, even if they don't stay with me, even if they want an outside assessment just to get an objective perspective so that they can do the work themselves, I'm fine with that. If they want to keep me along the way to help them create their plan for how they're going to attack it, I'm happy to do that. If they want to keep me to coach the organization through that change or development, I'm happy to do that too.
Absolutely. And so you're typically working with organizational leadership, right? C-suite. Right.
Ideally,
Yeah.
ideally, if you're going to create organizational change, working with your C-suite top leaders is where the biggest impact happens.
Sure.
Because they set the tone for the rest of the organization.
Exactly. And so that kind of leads me to my next question then, Jessica. What is that experience typically like for you? And I say that as someone who was in organizations for a long time. Like you mentioned earlier, I had that catalyst that helped transition me. But in experiencing up to the C-suite level, that organizational leadership, what's been your experience working with C-suite? And I've found that there's some that are very innovative and kind of forward thinking and open to, if you come into the nursery and say their baby's ugly, they may not like it, but they may, they're willing to ask you why you think that, and how can I make my baby a little prettier, I guess. But then there's others that aren't open to anything that resembles training and development, right? Everything has to be centered around, does it drive revenue, does it drive marketing, does it drive branding, that sort of thing. So what's your experience with that in working with senior leaders?
Well, I think as a population, we tend to look at senior leaders and go, well, they must have done something special or been something special. And that might be true. They might have been something special or done something special. That might be true, but they're really just human. And they're just human, being human.
Human beings. Yeah,
right?
And random human beings.
Right. And we all have our concerns. And those concerns you're talking about, when you have a C-suite person who's concerned about revenue, their bonus is probably tied to it.
Right.
Right. When you have a senior leader who's concerned about development, there's something in their performance review or something in their agreements with the rest of the C-suite that that is driving that focus.
Exactly.
One thing that I find helps switch the focus that are just, well, if it doesn't drive revenue, I'm out. Right. And you're trying to do, say, an employee engagement effort. We want to increase our employee engagement. Increased employee engagement increases profits by 17%. So, there's a direct line to revenue when you do these activities that that some folks in the C-suite will say, well, that's a waste of our time. It doesn't drive revenue, but it does drive revenue.
Exactly.
And if you can lay out, I have a philosophy that the facts will set you free. So if you can lay out the factual data, the evidence that says this is worth our time, then if they're open to shifting their belief structure, because it's really a belief switch, if they're open to the belief switch, they'll listen to that data. So the next step in that is really to wrap the story around it to get buy-in. If we know that we increase engagement by X%, then we can see X% increase in profits. Then what's stopping you is really the next question. And sometimes that has to happen in a one-on-one meeting because they're not willing to be open or vulnerable with their peers.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. And so, what are give us an example or two of something, Jessica, that you tend to work on. What's something pretty common that comes up that you get to work on?
Um, so the most common thing, because I have an Agile background, the most common thing I get to work on is Agile implementations and Agile transformations.
Yeah,
And this is, organizations that are trying to make agility part of their business.
sure. And what does that mean, by the way? I guess it's part
Sure.
of that. So, yeah, what does agility mean? Because I got introduced to that in my career, a little bit, actually fairly recent. And so, just to let the audience know, what does that mean?
Sure. So the Agile Manifesto for Software Development. It's probably backwards. Software Delivery Agile Manifesto. Anyway, the Agile Manifesto. It is. It comes out of the software development industry. It was
Okay.
officially documented in 2001, but it was it was based on other information that was already formulating in this area, and they basically just codified it. And since then, it's developed beyond that. But it started in software development, and there's basically 4 values that the Agile Manifesto professes. We want individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We want
Okay.
working software, or as it's developed now, working solutions over comprehensive documentation. We want to respond to change over following a plan, and we want customer collaboration over contract negotiation.
Okay.
The most important part of those, not the most important, one of the important parts of those is the over word that's in there. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We're not saying
Sure.
that processes and tools are bad. We're just saying we want to focus on the people before we focus on the processes and tools.
Yes.
If we're in a decision moment, we want to decide on the left-hand side of those statements, not the right-hand side of those statements.
Yep, absolutely. And what I find a lot of times, Jessica, is unfortunately, organizations do the opposite, right?
Mhm.
They they kind of, I don't want to say miscast, but they don't necessarily appreciate the people side of it as
That's right.
much as, like you say, the process, and the process then becomes bigger, and they often forget that very simple notion of, the people drive the process.
Yeah.
Right. The process is no good. I always say that, it's like the cameras, having security cameras is great as long as there's somebody watching and recording it. If
Yeah.
nobody's watching it and it's not recording, what value does a camera have
Yeah.
in a
Exactly.
security sense, right? And so, what do you do to encourage those leaders when they're not maybe quite on the same page with you in terms of their viewpoint of how they see people's role in resolving the issues?
Yeah. So there's a really key question to ask when leaders get resistant to involving people. There's a couple of them. One is, what's stopping you? What are you afraid will happen
Yeah,
if they're involved? What's the worst that could happen? What's the best that could happen? Right? That sort of range of questions there. And then the other question is often more about not what's stopping you, but what if it worked? What awesome things could we get out of it? If
right.
we engaged the people in this
Hmm.
problem solving, what could we get out of this?
Yeah,
And it gives them a moment to separate. Often what they're resistant to is an emotional reaction. It's usually
yes,
fear of the unknown, or not really trusting people to understand the context. And if your people don't understand the context, that's on you, right?
right.
So
Yep,
um,
exactly. No,
you
it's
know
very true, very,
yeah.
very, very true, and very important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's kind of the focus that we go on when we're trying to get leaders to shift in that mindset.
yeah,
um, the hardest shift in those kinds of transformations is actually middle managers. If the leaders are bought in and they're into it, they're ready for the work. They're going to do the work.
sure.
And the teams, once they start functioning in an agile way, they find it very conducive. It feels more natural to the way they work.
Yeah,
The middle managers have the hardest time, and they really run into a few conflicts of interest that happen for them. A middle manager at all times is carrying 3 hats. One of them is being an employee themselves. They're an
sure.
employee and they're concerned about their own promotions and pay raises, right?
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
they're concerned about being an advocate for the company as they know it, which means they're going to try and not like an enforcer for the status quo, essentially, is that role. And
Sure.
then their third role is an advocate for their employees. So they're trying to grow their employees and make the space the right for them so they can be successful, all of that. And they're carrying
Makes sense.
all 3 of those roles. If the leadership at the very top doesn't shift, The middle managers will lean themselves more towards enforcing status quo than they will towards encouraging change.
Wow.
Because that's how they protect their promotion and raises.
Right.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So, what's been the toughest project? Like, is there, one that's been like just extremely tough and rough and kind of rugged that you've had to deal with, or are most of your, kind of projects that you work with organizations, Jessica, do they tend to go fairly smooth once you have those introductory conversations?
Well, I like that hard work, like that nitty gritty tough stuff is stuff I like. So calling that hard is actually, it doesn't fit with my world order. So
I like that.
Yeah. So there's, I will say that there are some challenges I've seen that they take a delicate touch or they take a careful plan. I talk about being a coach as being a gardener, right? So I come in and I plant a seed, right? What's the worst that could happen? And we have that conversation. And I plant the seed and go, okay, well, maybe spend some time thinking about it. And I come back and I have another conversation. Did you think about that? What is the worst that could happen?
Right.
What if that does happen? Then what? Right. And we start to just plant. It's a lot of seed planting in my role.
Sure.
And asking good questions. Some challenges I've seen, the corporate office, if they're doing an agile transformation or an organizational change effort and they're doing it at a division instead of at the whole corporate office, and corporate office is in some other culture, you'll find the corporate office expectations are constraints on how far they can change.
Right.
The other challenge that I see most frequently is the time it takes to make change.
Yes.
People they're like, well, can we implement Agile in a year? Right?
How agile can we be, Jessica?
How agile can we be? And I don't have an answer for that question when people ask me, because it depends. It depends on how invested you are in making the transformation. It depends on how invested you are in helping each individual make the transformation. Because change, if you have an organization of 1,000 people and you're trying to get them to all, and you're here and you want to be somewhere else, you want to be another kind of company on the other side of our effort, then you've got to get the majority of those 1,000 people transformed to that way of being and thinking before your system gets over the curve and is really on the downhill slope to being in the new place.
Exactly.
So patience, I think patience is the biggest challenge.
Sure. Which is often the complete antithesis of senior leadership.
Yeah.
is having patience, right?
Yeah.
And things like that require a little bit different approach, right? Than simply looking at the accounting functions of the business or the marketing functions, things like that. Things like culture or because they require hands-on. And what I found in my experience, Jessica, is some senior leaders don't like to. One of their fears is the interaction with others within the organization that aren't at their title level, right?
Yeah.
So you get some that are maybe insecure about their interaction with their frontline employees, for example. I've seen that. Have you seen that within the organization? And to me, it seems like the better organizations have this healthy alignment between senior leadership throughout the organization, that they're visible, they hear from them. There's some level of engagement, and then the communication is transparent and able to flow two ways, that people feel kind of interconnected within the organization.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So you want your senior leadership, VPs and above, to really be focused on strategy, vision, mission, not did we deliver X piece of this product today, right? We don't want them down in the tactical details. We want them really focused on strategy, mission, vision. That's where we want them. Yeah. And then we want them to consistently and frequently be communicating that, and all of them using the same language. Because if you have a leadership in one division saying one thing and a leadership in another system saying another thing, then we're going to have two divisions that don't know how to work together. Right. So if there's infighting going on at leadership levels, it shows up in how collaborative those divisions are.
Yes.
So that's the first thing we really want leaders to start focusing on, is that is a people job. It is not a doing job.
That's very true.
All right. And that, when you're doing change management and organizational development, 80 to 85% of the work is in the people. And the rest of it is in process and tools, right? So you want folks to be really learning the skill sets that maybe they haven't developed yet, to have those conversations. And then, they might mess up. A leader's human. They're going to mess
Right.
up. They're going to be flawed. And we want them to lean into that. I made a mistake. Okay, how do we fix it? Let's own that you made the mistake, acknowledge the impact it had, and now talk about what's next. What are you going to do different in the future? What's the true reality that they should be listening to, right? Those kinds of conversations have to happen.
Yeah.
And if you're in an organization that's highly competitive, all your leadership has a really highly competitive spirit,
Sure.
showing that vulnerability can be scary. And that vulnerability essentially looks like a weakness in the leadership spaces, and it's not. The research bears out that the more vulnerable you are, the more courageous you are about vulnerability, the more effective you are as a leader and your organization is.
Yes.
So it's very counterintuitive, right? We think we need to protect people from seeing our inner flaws, but we actually need them to see our inner flaws. That's how your people learn.
Right. Very true.
Yeah.
No, it's good. That's a great point. When I was in the C-suite and I had a retail kind of function in banking, that was one of the things that I think helped me was, like you say, the ability to kind of be around and interact with my team so that they could see, like say, my action, my behavior, and how that aligns with the organizational culture and the mission. Do I embody and personify what I'm talking about and what we're sharing and what we encourage others to do, and understanding that people model, in some form or fashion, as an effective leader, good, bad, or ugly, people model that behavior, right?
Yeah.
They model, I found that the really good teams, when I'm leading really good teams, they start to sound like me. And, when I was, part of organizations where I'm following leadership, you begin to kind of adopt and kind of sound like them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that can be good, bad, or ugly. And I think sometimes leaders miss that. They don't necessarily appreciate the influence that they really do have. And that people within the organization, if they're respectable and, open and legal, more ethical leaders, people respect them and look up to them. Right. And I think a lot of men and women miss that when they're in those roles. Definitely.
There's a really good book you've brought to mind for me called "Turn the Ship Around" by David Marquette. Yeah. It's a really excellent book, and he talks about intent-based leadership. And he's got one of those little videos with the cartoon drawing that happens while he's talking, right?
Right.
And so that video, one of the things he talks about is that he endeavored to never give an order again as the captain of a Navy submarine, except for one. The only order he retained was the kill shot. So everybody else. Everybody else was free to make decisions. And that book really talks about what it means to set a context so people can make decisions that are safe and healthy for your organization.
Right.
Which means we're flipping essentially leadership on its head. When we look at the way we used to do businesses back in the 50s and 60s, we'll say, right? There was hierarchical meritocracies, and it was command and control, and people told you what to do, and you did the things people told you what to do. And if you did them well, you got promoted, right? That was the way things happened before. Now what we're saying is when you become a leader, you do less. You do less actual delivery of whatever it is we're doing, and more delivery of the environment that other people deliver in.
Right.
That's really the big shift that happens for people. And that mindset shift alone can be a big one for senior leaders.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. For those that aren't in senior leadership, what would you recommend for those that are in other areas of the organization, Jessica, and maybe they're experiencing, obstacles that are related to organizational culture, especially in this environment with COVID? I think one of the things that came up, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is, the notion of working from home. right?
Yeah.
As part of organizational culture. And, that's been an eye opener, I think, to say the least, for many leaders
Hmm.
around the country and around the world. Is for some organizations that were fairly lean and nimble and agile, as you say,
Hmm.
it was already a reality before the pandemic hit. Others were kind of, like you say, the catalyst. That was the catalyst that kind of forced the hand of having remote work.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, for those that are in those scenarios that are able to do remote work? What are, maybe some best practices or things, to work within an organizational culture that may be somewhat still, even today, somewhat still resistant to the impact of remote work and how that drives culture?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that really that you're really after when you're after culture. Culture is the culture is a mashup of the beliefs of the people in the system or
Yes.
organization, right? So it's just beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So if they believe your individual contributors believe that they don't have the power to change the tools that are at their disposal for remote work, then they're going to suffer whatever tools you've given them, right? For good or for bad.
Sure.
So as a leader, even a middle manager as opposed to a senior leader, if you're paying attention and listening to the cues about the things that your employees are frustrated with
Hmm.
or are experiencing, like you sit in on a meeting every now and again and you're like, my gosh, why do we have so much lag? And it turns out you have lag because the bandwidth on the VPN is awful.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity as a leader to go have a conversation with the person who picked the bandwidth, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
who chose that VPN client, who picked the bandwidth or whatever, and to go have a discussion with them about the impact it's having to your teams. It reduces their productivity by X%. Every meeting, they spend half the meeting dealing with complications with their equipment. This equipment
Right.
isn't effective. We want to, as leaders, start thinking about our customers as the individual contributors and
Yes.
start getting customer focused that way.
Hmm.
And they're busy worrying about your actual customers, the ones paying the bills, right? They're
Right.
worrying about your actual customers. You worry about them. So that's one thing that can be really important. Give them the tools that make them successful.
Yes.
Other true realities of a dispersed workforce is that our ability to understand communication without verbal and physical cues is greatly reduced. So we also want to set a tone that video is the norm as
Yes.
opposed to the exception. And almost all the tools now have an ability. If you're worried about privacy, for example, if you're a healthcare organization and you don't want people to like see sticky notes with passwords sitting on the wall, right?
Right.
None of these have passwords, by the way. None of these
Just so
sticky notes behind me.
NYB.
That's right. None of these sticky notes behind me have passwords. But if somebody's put their computer password on their wall behind them, and you don't want somebody to see it on video, all
Yeah.
of the tools have an ability to like put up virtual backgrounds or fuzz out the background. Those kinds of things. You could go the extra mile and give them all little like green screen curtains that they could hang behind them. So that's an option. There's ways to deal with the privacy. And I know Zoom had a lot of issues at the beginning, and they were very agile about it. They said, hey, we've messed up. Here's how we're fixing it. Here's when the fix will be out. And they were great about that.
Exactly. They
Um,
certainly will.
yeah. And they're not the only tool out there. I don't want to, I like Zoom, but they're not the only tool out there. There's, WebEx has done a lot to improve their breakout groups and their ability for functional web meetings. And there's, several others out there that are completely functional tools that make it possible for folks to see one another. But you have to make it a cultural norm that seeing one another is important. And so that if your teams are resistant to it, a leadership, this is where directives can become handy. Leadership expectation that you use video has to become part of your culture. We're expecting you
Yeah.
to be on video when you're in a meeting with more than one other person, right? So,
Right.
okay, great. So we'll be on video. You could provide them with the equipment they need in their space and just gift it to them, right?
Yeah.
Give them monitors, if they're stand-up people, give them stand-up desks. If they need headphones, noise canceling headphones to be able to work while their kids are running around in the background, give it to them, right? Just give them the tools they need. And I realized I just said gift it to them.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to cost you more money to track all those pieces of equipment and recover them as you have attrition than it will for you just to give them the stuff. So give it to them, tell them, Merry Christmas, and let it be done. and, and make them successful. Those kinds of tools are really useful. The other thing I recommend to teams when they're working in video calls is that if it's small enough, if it's like less than 8 people, that they don't put themselves on mute, because unless they've got a ridiculous amount of background noise, don't put yourself on mute, because the intakes of breath are something that we listen for socially.
Right. When speaking. Yeah.
When speaking, so that we know when somebody wants to talk, right?
We know someone's alive.
And alive, right? So that intake of breath makes it feel more real.
Right. Exactly.
And another small recommendation I offer is that if you do hand signals, you stick them up by your face instead of down low. You put them up in the video so people can see that body language as well.
Yeah.
And then the use of virtual whiteboarding type tools like Miro or Mural are really good additions from a tools-based perspective. Those are all tools. Like if you just give people those tools, they'll work it out. And those tools plus the expectation that people be on video.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. What do you see as we go through, because we don't have the crystal ball to go through in the 2021, do you see any trends, Jessica, or anything as it relates to organizational development? I know, that may kind of stick. Obviously the remote work is one. Are you seeing anything else that we should all be aware of and maybe be mindful for those going back into organizations or those leading organizations themselves as entrepreneurs and business owners?
Yeah. Well, definitely the move to remote work is probably here to stay. If your organization can do it and you don't offer it, then you will not get top talent. That's just the end of it. At this point, anybody who is in a knowledge work industry and can do their work from home is expecting to be able to do their work from home.
Sure.
We entered into the great remote experiment and it was successful. So,
right.
So there's that. I think a step further from work from home is the work from anywhere policies, where not only you work from home, you may not even be in the same city as the company is based in.
Of course.
So I think there's an extension. Now, if we say that you can work from home, well, then my home doesn't have to be in the same town as my company.
Right.
And that frees me up. So we might see, with the cultural norm of moving towards big cities, we might actually see some dispersal back out into the rural towns as people go, okay, I can work from home. I'm going to work from home and be near my parents, right? Or near my family. So we might see a shift in real estate towards home real estate away from commercial real estate. And I think we've seen some of that too already.
Yeah.
So those are things I definitely see as true. I think the way we think about leadership has been forced to shift a little bit more rapidly as a result of this change. It's very clear that your teams don't need you to do their work. And leaders are starting to really get that. They're like, they don't need me to do their work. They just need to know what work to do, like what we're headed. As long as they know where we're headed, they get it done. I'm not necessary here, right? So there's sort of a crisis of conscious of identity going on for middle management for sure. And I think that will result in a shift in our human resources policies towards performance evaluations that measure that for leaders. Instead of measuring delivery, we start measuring how successful are your teams? How are you helping them grow? How are you holding the organizational bubble that makes delivery possible?
Sure. Yep. No, absolutely. As we wrap up, Jessica, because this has been a great dialogue and, learned a lot about, kind of your approach to helping leaders, be just a little bit better with your organization that makes things better for the community, for customers, prospects, and employees, vendors, everybody around the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
What are, for those that are in the worker roles, right, who may be listening to, this episode, what would be what were some best practices that work for you when you were working for organizations that they can take away from them as they're going through this holiday season and preparing for next year? What's something you can kind of give them that has worked well for you, that, they can incorporate and be just a little bit better?
Yeah. So one thing I would suggest is don't wait for your manager to give you a direction for your career. Take control of your career. Decide what you want to be when you grow up next, right?
Yeah,
and right. what do you want to be when you grow up is a question I've answered several times in the course
Oh,
of my
we all
life.
do. Yeah.
Right. And so take charge of that. Decide, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then look at, all right, what training do I need to get? What experiences do I need to have access to? What do I want to try and do? And then talk proactively with your manager about that.
Sure.
Your manager's there then to help you get access to that.
Yeah.
So that's my first recommendation. My second recommendation is that if your personal value system is out of alignment with the value system where you work, go find somewhere else to work.
Yes.
It's miserable to put yourself through that cognitive dissonance every day. It's exhausting and stressful. So go find a job that better resonates with who you are and where you want to go.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, those are tremendous, best practices and very critical as people go into the new year and they think about, like you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And now more than ever is a tremendous opportunity. Whether you have the opportunity to work remote or maybe you don't, if you're more in the frontline service worker position and you don't, but thinking about, like you say, not waiting on someone to direct your career, but like say, taking, leadership for yourself in your career, and that sort of thing is just tremendous. That's tremendous feedback, for us all to consider, no matter what level that we're at. So, Jessica, this has been, tremendous. I can tell that you're someone, you've got the right temperament to go in and really kind of help some folks probably out of some sticky situations, I'm sure that you come across. But I think, many that, that may work for organizations that you've helped may not always realize. They may see the results of it, but may not be privy to the conversations that you have with that leadership team. So definitely, I'm sure they knew that they'd be very appreciative that you're helping their organization again be better. So thank you for taking time to share with us. I really appreciate that. Definitely happy holidays to you and your family.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah, as we go forward and look to remain connected. For those that may be interested, someone that's leading an organization, or maybe someone who's got a business that's beginning to scale, and now they've got, they find themselves now with maybe a handful of employees that they didn't have before. How can they get in touch with you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn a little bit more?
Sure. So they could, of course, go to my website, liberatedelephant.com. And there's an opportunity there. You can book a free 30 minutes with me if you just want to talk about what's going on. But also my list of services is there, and I'm happy to talk through them. But also, if you just want to see what's happening when I'm on a podcast or when I've written a blog or where I'm speaking, you can follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best option. My LinkedIn flows over to my Twitter account. So if you're following my Twitter, you'll see the same thing you see on LinkedIn.
Right.
But that is those are the two social media places I post the most.
Okay. Excellent. So MYB, you can find Jessica Katz on LinkedIn, as well as let that filter over to Twitter, where you can catch her. And then liberatedelephant.com is where you need to go. That's in the show notes. So when you get done listening, make sure you go to liberatedelephant.com. Connect with Jessica, and then if you decide to communicate with her, which I encourage you to do so, and schedule your 30-minute call, and share with her what's going on with your organization or with you within the organization. I encourage you to do that, and let her know that you heard her right here on the Minding Your Business podcast. So Jessica, again, thank you so much. Again, best wishes to you personally and professionally, and look forward to having you back at some point here in the future as you maybe pick up some more kind of tall tales and escapades with organizations in 2021, and you can come back and kind of share them with us and help us be a little bit better as you have today. So thank you.
Thank you. That would be great to come back again. It was awesome to be here with you today.
Excellent. That was Jessica Katz joining us here in MYB. And I think you got just tremendous engagement and value with what she brings to the table. She's a coach and speaker. She's a trainer, mentor for Liberated Elephant. Go to liberatedelephant.com. You can connect with me, champronbrooks.com, for all my ventures and escapades, whether it's the podcast, whether it's community bank consulting, whether it's real estate investing, the various things that I'm involved in. Be mindful and check me out there, champronbrooks.com. Don't forget, I've got a full house for my real estate investing in 2021 webinar that's on Zoom. I've got a full house now at 100 people. So thank you so much. That didn't take long. So I appreciate you guys jumping on over that. I'm sure I'm going to be getting requests about doing another one, and I most certainly will. But for those who are engaged with that, that is going to be Sunday, December the 27th at 4 p.m. Central Time. Be to class on time. I'll be going through for about an hour everything that I do around real estate investing, kind of the basic steps. And I'll debunk a few myths that are out there around real estate investing. And ultimately, how you can get involved is something that you have interest in. Listen, go be just a little bit better for yourself, a little bit better for your family, and a little bit better for your community. Those are three things that unite us all, no matter where we're from, no matter what side of the tracks, no matter what your upbringing was. We all have that in common. And I think if we stick to our commonalities versus our differences, you can, our guest today, Jessica, mentioned Twitter. You can easily go to Twitter and find all your differences, right? I think there's some people who are just professionally pissed off, and they just like to be that way. And they just spend all day on Twitter looking for not just who they may devour, but they look for who they can disagree with and who can make them angry. Oh, who do I not like? Who's got ideology different from mine, right? I think if we spend more time in YB looking for commonalities, right, and the basic things that we have in common are those three things that I mentioned. So keep that in mind as you interact with everyone. And you never know who's going through what. And sometimes just a simple smile and a simple acknowledgement and just being kind can go so much further. It'll bring so much, positive vibes to yourself. And when you give positive vibes, it'll help us make this place just a little bit better. All right. Go take care and be great. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast.